Hello, and welcome back to the podcast where you are invited for lighthearted conversations about things that matter as you seek to live your most meaningful, beautiful, and joyful life. I'm your host, Dr. Edie Wadsworth, and I hope you enjoy your stay here at the House of Joy. Well, hi, dear ones. Welcome back to the podcast. This is episode 267. I'm Dr. E here. I'm so glad you're here. I have a really good episode for us today. Today, we are talking about the surprising connection between self-confidence and thriving relationships. Now, listen, it might not be quite that obvious to you now, but I have a really powerful story to share with you that I don't actually think I've ever shared publicly. I don't think so. But I'm going to talk about a time when I was really, really insecure and experienced sort of this terrible emotion of jealousy and how that had me showing up in my relationship, and then how I was able to work through that and reframe it and really cultivate more of a confident way of approaching relationships, coming from like an emotional grounded place where I learned how to regulate my own emotions and take responsibility for my own emotions. So we're going to talk about that today, because this issue of self-confidence, I don't mean by that, because I think a lot of people bristle when I say that or whatever, because we have this, view in our minds of what we think it means. What I really mean when I say that is that you are confident in your ability to respond to your life, to the situations in your life, to the circumstances in your life, to the people in your life, to the emotions in your life, in a way that feels empowering, that feels grounded, that feels like it's in service of both you and the people in your life. So that's really what I mean. The confidence that you can handle your life and that you can respond in a way that you want to. And so I'm really excited to dive in. This is a topic that we have been talking about lately, and I will remind you that we are doing the Confidence Code workshop at the end of March, where we are literally going to walk you through how to really own your own voice, how to really own your emotional power, and how to really step into your purpose by breaking free from a lot of the self-doubt that holds us back and creating the beautiful magnetic life that you want to create. So if you're ready to stop playing small and live your most engaged, most magnetic life, this is the workshop for you. It is going to be incredible, you guys. And we will talk a lot about identity, a lot about this emotional adulthood, emotional regulation, and a lot about your calling. But I wanted to tell you about some fun bonuses before I dive into the rest of the podcast, because we are going to do a mini course in there for those of you who upgrade to the All Access Pass. We're doing a midlife glow up mini course in there, which is going to be amazing. You also, when you upgrade to the All Access Pass, you get our workbook shipped to you. It's amazing as well. Our workbooks are so good. And even if you decide not to upgrade, we are doing a bonus style class. So closely related to this whole thing of how we're showing up, how we live our life, how we choose to dress ourselves, how we take care of ourselves. All of those things are really informed by learning to have the kind of self-confidence that makes you put people at ease, that gives you this magnetic quality about you. And we are going to talk about that in relation to style. So we're doing a bonus style workshop. And we're starting that bonus style workshop with once you join the confidence workshop, you get added to our Facebook group, and I'm doing a closet tour in there, showing my 5 favorite spring pieces. So that's just a little introduction to some fun bonuses that are going to be a part of this workshop. So you head over to ediewadsworthcoaching.com/code and get signed up. Okay, let me start today's episode with a crazy story. So, you guys, I have never in my whole entire life, except for this episode that I'm going to tell you about, really ever struggled with jealousy. I don't know. I think, some people are just prone to it. I never have been. I would have said before this, I feel like this sort of jealousy moment came out of nowhere and like attacked me. But before that, I would have said, I don't have one jealous bone in my body. It's just not an emotion that I struggle with. It's not something that I ever really experienced hardly at all. And it it happened. This has been years ago. Like, I think my daughter Ellie was little, so I was probably postpartum, and what happened was I it literally felt like it descended upon me. And I have so much compassion now for people who experience jealousy, because I'm like, that is the most terrible emotion. I was so thankful that I was able to just kind of work through it, and it just slowly subsided. But I got this idea in my head that Stevie might be giving extra attention to this girl at our church. And it was a new person that came into our church. We went to a tiny little church, and I became obsessed with, like, oh my gosh, did he notice her? Oh my gosh. And it was something that overtook me that I can't even explain. I'm sharing it with you. I almost didn't share it because I'm like, "Oh my gosh, it was so long ago and it was such a terrible experience." But I know that people go through this, and it really will demonstrate what I want to talk to you about today. So, this lasted for a couple of months, and I finally got the nerve to talk to him about it. And I said, "You know what? I have never experienced this before, and it is the most uncomfortable thing to admit." And as soon as I started talking to him about it, I started sobbing, you guys. And I finally got myself together, and in that, like, it's almost like in that break of vulnerability, I was just really able to communicate how I was feeling. And I'm like, "I know it's not you, and I am so sorry, but I really want to work through this, and I don't even understand why it's happening. But I just want you to know so that you can help me, so that we can be a team together, so that you can be patient with me if, this keeps coming up for me." And maybe even at the time I thought to myself, "Oh, gosh, maybe this is related to just having a baby." I don't know. But this really, I realized as I kind of gave myself the space to really work through it, I realized, like, this was not about him at all. This was not about her at all. This was about me and my own insecurity, like what I was going through myself. And I realized, okay, this is just a very human emotion that a lot of people actually experience. It's a natural human feeling. There's nothing to be ashamed of. It doesn't make me a bad person. It doesn't make me weak. But I also am so glad that I took some time with it to figure out, how can I be, connected to myself and honest with myself about what I'm feeling without making him the bad guy, or, creating a lot of disconnection in my relationship. And what I realized after I worked through this whole thing was that I was just in a period of insecurity, and I really had never experienced it like that before. Um just I just didn't feel comfortable at that point, maybe in my own skin, or for whatever reason, I was going through a period of insecurity. And I realized it, and I was able to be honest with myself about it, be vulnerable with him about it, so that we could actually just talk about it, so that I could take responsibility for it instead of blaming him for it. And I look at that incident, again, it lasted a couple of months. I look at that as, it was such a way to help me grow in my own emotional security. And, even though I didn't have the coaching tools that I have now, I'm definitely thankful for how he and I were able to work through it. And, for me, really learning how to reframe the emotion and figure out, like, oh, where is this coming from, and being patient with myself and not making myself wrong for it, and remembering that, you know um even something like this, I can handle an experience like this, and I can stay connected to myself, and I can stay connected to him. And again, even though I didn't have a name for the tools that I now would teach my clients with how to work through something like this, the fact that I was able to be really vulnerable with him and vulnerable with myself helped us work through it without a lot of shame on myself and without me blaming him. And we worked through it. And I have never had anything like it again. It literally felt to me like it came out of nowhere. Like, it just, a wave of jealousy came over me that felt like it's like I didn't have an option. Now I realize I did, but it was really powerful. So I want to start with that because I think a lot of us, when we're experiencing self doubt or when we're going through periods of insecurity, we're like holding on to it ourselves. It's not something that we're willing to be vulnerable with other people about. And I know that this is a time in midlife where sometimes we're like literally looking in the mirror and we're going, oh my gosh, where is she? Like we do, there's parts of ourselves that we don't recognize and we're so hard on ourselves and our bodies are changing and our skin is changing and everything is changing. And I want us to be able to approach this season of life really reclaiming this self-confidence, deciding on purpose that even all of these hard changes, even all of this, I'm willing to stay connected to myself. I'm willing to respond to my life in an intentional, purposeful way. I am not willing to be mean to myself. And I think if we can learn how to do this, it will change the way we show up. It will give us these tools that we need to stay really emotionally regulated and grounded, even through changes that feel hard. Um, so I want you to imagine for yourself what it's like to feel this way, to feel like so much self doubt, to feel maybe something like jealousy, to compare yourself to other people, to be really down on yourself about where you are with your health or where you are with your body, and how that insecurity and self consciousness can, if we don't recognize it and we aren't willing to be vulnerable about it, how it can sabotage our relationships. So um I know that for me, until I was willing to have this sort of like really honest, sit down, vulnerable moment, I was likely, you can probably, Stevie could probably tell you better than me. I'm sure I was sabotaging our relationship. I'm sure I wasn't showing up well. I'm sure I was secretly mad at him and he could feel that, or, or whatever. And when we are that way, when we're dealing with something that we're not honest about, when we're in an insecure place, we're really looking for someone else to confirm our worth, confirm our value, give us praise for, you know, we're looking for them to give us emotionally what we have not been willing to give ourselves. We show up in this place that feels kind of needy and dependent. They call this in psychology being kind of in emotional childhood. I definitely was in this when this wave of jealousy hit me. And instead of operating our relationships from this adult place, from this place of wholeness, from this place of, I know who I am in God. He created me. He's made me worthy no matter what season I'm in. When we're not operating there, what happens is we're showing up in such a way that it makes the cycle worse. We're showing up needy. And then that's difficult for the person on the other side. That's not a fun reciprocal relationship. So then they probably maybe pull away. And then that confirms our suspicion. Oh, yeah, he's pulling away because maybe he is interested in this other person or whatever we make that mean. And I say all that because I started to feel a little bit crazy before I was willing to be really honest about what I was going through. And it was just, it felt terrible. It felt terrible to me to be the one experiencing it, and I'm sure it felt terrible for him. So I'm so thankful that pretty early on in the process I was able to just be totally honest and say, oh my gosh, I'm struggling with this. I know this is not about you. I know this is something that I'm dealing with, but I just really want your help. I've never really experienced this before, and this is something that I want to work through. Instead of constantly silently expecting something from him, extra validation or constant reassurance, which can feel like an emotional drain on the other person, instead of doing that, I finally just was like, here's what I'm struggling with. So when we're in this place of feeling insecure and being dependent and being needy, it's like we're holding out a cup and hoping that someone else fills it. But the trouble is there's a hole in the cup. And it doesn't matter usually how much they pour in or what they say. We truly never feel this sort of emotional fullness because other people can't do this for us, you guys. And that can then lead to frustration and resentment and distance. We feel disconnected from ourselves and for other people. And that's where it can really snowball into something that's not great, can turn into manipulation. It can turn into, playing the victim in order to get sympathy. It can turn into complaining about that person behind their back, withdrawing, which is always was before I learned these tools. Kind of my mode is just to withdraw, or to be constantly seeking approval and validation for ourselves. And while these can seem like, well, we can all do this from time to time and it can seem subtle, over time, it really erodes the trust in a relationship. The other person will start feeling like they can't even be themselves around us. And instead of creating this like mutual love and care and respect, we shift into this pattern where we're constantly going to that other person to validate us, to make us feel a certain way, instead of realizing, like, oh, this is something that only I can do for myself. And I have to work on my sense of worth, my sense of value outside of that person. And I have to decide that I can be responsible for my own emotions, that I can respond even when I'm having these hard, emotions and thoughts, that I can handle my own life. It's like, instead of handing over the reins of our well being and our emotions and our worth to someone else, we decide, no, this is my job. This is something that I have to do for myself. So if you've been in a cycle like this, you don't have to stay in this cycle. And the first step really is awareness, to see where you're doing it, to see where you're handing this over to someone else and making them overly responsible for how you feel in the relationship. Now, healthy relationships that are really, really thriving, start with a good relationship of you to yourself. So, we've talked about how this sort of neediness and this emotional childhood and this delegating to other people, creates relationship that is really, it's not true. It doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel connected. We won't ever have a healthier relationship with other people than we learn to cultivate with ourselves. And if we are constantly seeking approval from others and constantly seeking validation because we don't fully believe that we're worthy and valuable, we don't believe what God says about us, and anchor our sense of self-worth in that and in truth, then you're approaching relationships from a place that is not going to create this thriving sense of mutual care and respect. But once you do shift this, then you are now set up to start really building a relationship that is going to be so healthy, so vibrant, so thriving, when both people are coming from this place of emotional wealth. They both know their worth. They both have a healthy sense of being grounded. They both understand where their value comes from. They both know that they're responsible for their own emotions in this relationship. This is where we can create such thriving relationships where, we come to it emotionally secure so that we can show up really for the other person. We can grow together, support each other. It's like this relational maturity that feels so fulfilling. It's the kind of relationship where you're no longer thinking about, well, what does he think about me? What can I get out of this? But instead, you're both coming with, how can I show up in a powerful way for you? What do you need? How can I help you? It's almost like you forget about yourself in the best way, instead of coming like self-conscious, where all you can think about is yourself. Um, where there's no competition, there's no insecurity, there's no need to be right. You're just willing to show up totally connected and vulnerable, and even owning, like the example I gave, when you're having hard emotions, even being able to own that and stay connected through something that's challenging like that. And when two people enter this relationship from this place of emotional security, it creates such a space where you can be vulnerable together, where you can be your true self and share your heart and weather any storm together. And this confidence piece is so important, because literally, this is something that you can feel in other people. You can feel it when somebody is coming to a relationship and they need something from you, instead of they're coming to the relationship grounded, sure of who they are, confident that they can handle whatever life throws at them, and ready to be in this sort of emotionally mature, secure relationship. This Over the years, Stevie and I have been able to build this together, and I'm so grateful. It's like You learn to give each other the benefit of the doubt. You learn to see each other as your highest self. You live with this mutual respect and self trust and trust in the other person. And I really do believe that it's the foundation of the most beautiful connected relationships. And really, you guys, at the end of life, it's really what matters. If you ask people, when they're taking their last dying breath, they don't care what material things they have. They don't care what work they did really that much. They don't care about much really, except for the people close to them and their relationships. Harvard did a 75-year study and found that the quality of your relationships is a greater predictor even of overall well-being than anything else. So this is really important. Relationships matter to us more than anything, turns out. This is why cultivating these meaningful, fulfilling, grounded relationships that are steeped in this emotional maturity, this self-worth, this self-confidence, so important. And when we can show up from a place of emotional strength and authenticity, it really creates this domino effect for other people to do that. It's very contagious when someone is willing to be really authentic and vulnerable and to really be who they are. You can establish such deep, satisfying relationships. So, I want to ask you this question. Do you show up to your relationships this way, or do you show up self-conscious? Do you show up needy? Do you show up dependent? Do you show up kind of subconsciously asking the question, am I worthy? Am I valuable to you? You are the one who has to decide that based on what God has said about you. And your self confidence that it's grounded in the worth that you've been given from God will directly shape the quality of your relationships. The more you embrace this emotional power that you have to respond the way you want to respond from your most loving, highest self, the more you do that, the more other people will do that. It invites other people into this way of being in relationships. So I hope this has inspired you today. I hope that you will think about how you're showing up, and especially when we're going through challenging seasons like midlife can be, let's just be honest about it. I was even saying to Stevie not too long ago, like, I've been doing, really, really well for the most part. I'm 55 years old, just started going through what I consider to be sort of the early signs of menopause. And it feels like the last few months that my hormones are changing. And I've just been really vulnerable and honest about that. I'm like, oh, I actually just went last week and got some more blood work because I'm like, yeah, I can feel things changing again. And I just want to be able to be open because I know that it's affecting me. I know that, my mood has been a little different. I know that, I just feel a little different, and I want to be able to be open and honest about that. And this is the kind of thing that over time, I think gives you the most satisfying relationships. So I hope that's been helpful today. Thank you so much for joining me. We would love to have you in the Confidence Code workshop, where we are going to talk all about identity. We are going to talk all about your emotional power and how to really show up for yourself in such a way that it's magnetic, that it draws other people in, that you get to show up as your most authentic, magnetic self, and then how that translates into your purpose and your calling and your dreams. So, this is going to be a great workshop, you guys. Remember all the fun style bonuses that we will be doing. So, I hope to see you there. And thanks for joining the podcast. And I can't wait to see you next time. Bye for now.